Man, what's happening, fantasy world? It's your boy, So. I'm here to bring you week 15. I told you so. We always go over our top 5 starts, top 5 sits from the previous week. And I want to talk about those guys that overachieved, those guys that underachieved. How did I fare with my top 5 picks and my top 5 sits? We're going to start with our top 5 starts from last week. Kupp was my number 1 off the board. He came up with wide receiver 1 numbers. He ended up being wide receiver 4 overall on the week. That's right, man. Kupp, 8 receptions, 111 yards off of 8 targets and a touchdown. Look, man, it's a hit, man. The suit was right. Kupp did his thing. We're on to the next. Number 2 off my board was Jahmyr Gibbs. Did Jahmyr have a day? That's right, man. Jahmyr, 23.8 fantasy points, number 2 in fantasy scoring standard leagues. The man had 11 rushes, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Also added 2 receptions for 8 yards and a touchdown. He was on fire, and I don't see that stopping. Montgomery touches are going down. Jahmyr's are going up. Jahmyr Gibbs is now the preferred back in Detroit, especially in passing situations. Our number 3 back off the board was Rachaad White. Rachaad White had another big day, 20.9 fantasy points in standard scoring. That man had 21 rushes, 89 yards, also had 2 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown. Listen, man, that's 23 more touches this week. Get him in your lineups, y'all. Don't be stupid. Another quarterback that I had on my list that did not fare well was Jordanlove. That was my miss on the week for my starts. Jordanlove, 17.46 fantasy points, 284 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. He did not get it done on the ground. He ended up being a QB2. That is a miss in my book. The number 1 tight end in fantasy scoring this week, davidnjoku. Davidnjoku, 21.4 fantasy points. He had 14 targets. That man went off for 10 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. He actually ended up number 2 overall. But, hey, who's to say the number 2 wasn't a start, right? Top 10 guy, number 2 tight end overall. I told y'all what it was going to be. Davidnjoku, get him in your lineups, lock it, and forget it. So, out of my top 5 picks, 4 of them was bangers. And I'm talking about bangers, top 2 in their category in fantasy points scored. Your boy Soup was on fire this week on the starts. If you're looking for the recipe for having a winning lineup in the playoffs, you need to check out my top 5 star show later on this week. Let's go over our sits. Man, didn't fare well on the sits at all. For our top 5 sits, my number 1 was Keenanallen. He ended up not playing due to injury, so that's going to be a wash. Calvin Ridley was a bench for me. He did terrible. Calvin Ridley had 5 receptions, 39 yards off of 12 targets. 5 receptions off of 12 targets. Get him out your lineups, man. He is not that guy. Evan Ingram is that guy right now in Jacksonville. He ended up with 6.4 fantasy points, ended up being a wide receiver 5 on the week. Overall, I believe he was number 44. That's right, man. I was right on Calvin Ridley. I missed on James Conner. James Conner ended up being an RB1, 16.4 points in fantasy scoring. He was overall number 10 in fantasy points for running back. So I missed on James Conner, had 14 carries, 86 yards, and a TD. Also had 3 receptions for 3 yards. So James Conner, his usage factor is up. He's not an explosive guy, but he is going to get those touches, so he has a high floor. Kenneth Walker ended up smashing out last night in the Monday night game. So I missed on Kenneth Walker as well. I did hit on Patty Mahomes. Told y'all to bench Patty. He ended up QB2, number 13 overall in fantasy scoring. You got to be top 10 to be a hit. And he did not, man. He had 305 yards passing, but ended up with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Good for 17.7 fantasy points. Pat Mahomes was a sit. There were 12 other guys you could have put in your lineups, meaning even in 12-man leagues, he was a sit. So with that said, I need y'all to check out my top 5 starts, top 5 sits later on this week. Hot Soup went 6 for 9. That is over 60%. Again, that's right. Your boy Soup got the ingredients. Holla.